Montana Territory, 1883. The wind cut low through the pines, dragging dust across the dry road into Stillwater. That was the day Harper Gentry arrived in town with a fake name, a stolen brooch tucked into her corset, and a plan to dupe a cowboy out of enough money to carry her far from the law and the past chasing her. She stepped down from the wagon with a practiced smile and a suitcase that carried only 2 dresses, a forged letter, and all her lies. "Name?" asked the hotel clerk, not looking up. "Clara Gold," she said, steady as a preacher's voice on Sunday. The man scribbled it down. "Room upstairs, 2 bits a night, baths out back." Harper nodded, keeping her back straight and her face soft. She had done this before. Change your name. Pretend to be someone else. Smile sweet. Get what you need. Leave. But this time was different. This time she was desperate. She had not eaten since the morning before, and the town was smaller than she expected. If she did not find someone to scam by the end of the week, she would have to sell the brooch, her mother's brooch, and she was not ready for that. She leaned against the rail outside the saloon, watching the men go in and out. Most were rough ranch hands or older miners, the kind who would not fall for a sob story. Then she saw him. He stood tall beside his paint horse, checking the straps on his saddle. His shirt was dusted with trail dirt, sleeves rolled up to sun-browned arms. He had a quiet steadiness to him, like someone who did not speak unless he meant it. He looked maybe 27, maybe 30, young but not foolish. That was the kind of man Harper could work with. She waited until he was finished and stepped toward him, careful not to look too eager. "Excuse me, sir," she said, voice soft. "I do not mean to trouble you, but I was told you might know where a lady can find work. I am traveling alone, and well, I would be grateful for any help." He looked at her, calm and serious. His eyes were gray-blue, like a winter sky. "You from around here?" he asked. "No," she said quickly. "Came up from Kansas. My brother was supposed to meet me, but he never showed." She saw a flicker of sympathy cross his face. That was good. Sympathy was useful. "I got a small spread north of here," he said. "Could use someone to cook for the hands through haying season. Nothing fancy, but it pays honest." Harper smiled with practiced gratitude. "That would be a blessing, mister." "Zeke Barton," he said, nodding once. "And you?" "Clara Gold," she repeated. "All right, Miss Gold. Be at the livery at sunup. We ride out then." Zeke tipped his hat and walked away. Harper stood there, heart racing. That had been almost too easy. The next morning, she met him by the livery, wearing the plainer of her 2 dresses. He had a second horse saddled for her. She mounted without complaint, though her thighs ached halfway through the ride. His ranch sat in a narrow valley surrounded by pine and aspen. Modest but well-kept. 3 hands worked the land, all polite but quiet. Zeke showed her the small cabin near the main house where she would sleep, then gave her space. That night, Harper cooked beans and cornbread over the stove. She had learned to cook well enough to pass. Zeke thanked her with a quiet nod, then sat outside on the porch, watching the sun go down. She joined him, folding her hands in her lap, pretending to be nervous. "I appreciate your kindness," she said. "Not many men would offer help to a stranger." Zeke looked over at her. "You looked like you needed it." "I do," she said softly. "My family's gone. My brother. He ran off. I do not have anywhere else to go." That part was true or close enough. The real story was uglier. Zeke nodded, not pressing her. He just looked at the horizon, lantern light painting his profile in gold. "You ever work cattle?" he asked after a long silence. "No, sir." "Well, you will learn." She watched him stand and walk inside. Something about him made her chest ache, and she told herself it was just hunger and the cold. 3 days passed. Harper worked hard because she had to. She chopped vegetables, washed shirts, and swept the porch. She told herself it was all part of the act. But each night, Zeke sat with her, quiet and steady, asking small questions. Where had she grown up? What did she like to read? Did she play piano? She answered with half-truths. But she started looking forward to those moments more than she should have. On the 4th morning, she woke to shouting. She ran outside barefoot. Zeke was kneeling beside a wagon stuck in the mud near the creek. Inside were 2 children, both under 10, dirty and crying. A woman's body lay beside the wagon, still and cold. Zeke's mouth was tight. She must have passed last night. Looks like they tried to cross and got stuck. Harper clutched her chest. The children. They are alone now. The younger one, a girl with tangled blonde hair, reached for Harper. She picked her up without thinking, rocking her gently. Zeke stood. We will take them in until we can find kin. That night, Harper sat with the 2 children, Becca and Bo, reading from an old Bible she found on the shelf. Zeke leaned in the doorway, arms crossed. You are good with them, he said. I had a little brother, she said softly, brushing Becca's hair. He died when I was 15. Zeke nodded, his eyes steady on her. She looked away, guilt twisting in her stomach. She had come here to trick him, lie to him, take his money and leave. And yet, she had never had a man look at her like that, like he saw her. That night, she lay awake in the dark, listening to the wind. Her chest ached, but not from hunger. It was something else now, something warm. She no longer knew where the lie ended and the truth began. And for the first time in her life, that scared her. Harper rose early, before the sky had fully shaken off the night. The cabin held the hush of sleep. Becca curled beneath a quilt, Bo breathing soft beside the stove. She pulled her boots on quietly and stepped outside. The land was still pale blue with dawn. She walked toward the barn, not because she was needed there, but because her hands felt too restless to stay idle. Zeke was already inside, checking the feed barrels. You always up this early? She asked, not bothering to soften her voice. He didn't glance over. Sun waits for no one. She leaned against the post, arms folded. Must be tiresome. All that waiting for it to rise just to chase it across the land all day. Zeke looked at her then, not with amusement, but something more thoughtful. You get used to the rhythm. Work's easier when you move with it. Harper stepped inside the barn, letting the dust settle around her. I never stayed anywhere long enough to learn a rhythm. You plan to leave? He asked, quiet. I always plan to, she said, brushing her fingers along the edge of a stall door. Doesn't always go how I want. He didn't answer. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, just full. Later that morning, she found Becca on the porch, holding a broken doll Harper hadn't seen before. The cloth was torn at the arm, stuffing peeking out. The girl didn't cry, just stared at it like something inside her had come loose with it. Harper crouched beside her. Where'd she come from? Wagon, Becca said. Mama made her. Harper didn't ask about the woman. Instead, she reached for her sewing kit without a word and began mending the tear with small, neat stitches. Becca leaned close, watching. You good at fixin' things? I've had to be, Harper said. Sometimes it's just you and what's broken. No one else to patch it. When Becca took the doll back, she cradled it with care. Harper didn't expect the girl to lean into her side, but she did. That evening, after supper, one of the ranch hands, a wiry man named Walt, approached Zeke at the fence line, speaking low. Harper watched from the porch, arms crossed against the chill. Zeke returned with a look she hadn't seen before, something edged with quiet frustration. Fence is down along the southern boundary, he said. Cattle might have drifted. I'll ride out. I'll come, Harper said. Zeke paused. It's not just a stroll. It's rough land. I didn't ask for easy. She grabbed her coat and didn't wait for permission. They rode in silence, the horses picking their way through sagebrush and rock. The wind picked up as the sun dipped lower, turning everything amber. When they reached the broken fence, Zeke dismounted first. Harper watched him assess the damage posts pulled up, wires slack and bent. Could be elk, he said, or someone hoping to shift the boundary. People do that? She asked, disbelieving. He nodded. Land's worth more than some lives. She knelt beside him, holding the wire steady while he repaired it. Her fingers caught a burr and blood welled in a thin line across her palm. Zeke reached for her hand without comment. He pulled a clean cloth from his coat and wrapped it tight. You don't flinch, he said. I learned not to. They didn't speak again until the fence stood tall and tight once more. The sun had gone, leaving only a bruised purple sky. On the ride back, Harper asked, You ever think of leaving this place? Used to, Zeke said. After my brother died, I figured I'd sell the land and go east. Didn't make it past the county line. What stopped you? Something about the quiet. He looked out toward the darkened hills. I knew I'd never find it again. She didn't reply. Her chest ached in a way she didn't have words for. When they returned, the children were asleep, and the hands had turned in. Zeke leaned a shoulder against the porch rail while Harper stood beside him, arms folded. You don't talk much, she said. Words aren't always useful. And yet you say just enough. He turned to her, searching her face. You trying to figure me out? Maybe. Why? She hesitated, then looked away. Because you don't make sense to me. You helped a stranger. You took in 2 children. You never ask for anything in return. You think I should? I think people don't do that without a reason. Zeke's voice was low. Maybe I just don't like seeing folks left behind. Harper looked up at him then, and the space between them narrowed. She didn't know who leaned in first, maybe neither of them did. But her breath caught when his hand brushed her cheek, not to claim, but to ask. She closed her eyes, just for a second, letting herself feel the warmth of it. Then she pulled back. I'm not who you think I am, she said, voice barely above a whisper. Zeke didn't press. He just looked at her like he'd already known that, and it hadn't changed anything. You don't have to be, he said. Harper stayed outside long after he went in, the stars sharp above her. She had come here to steal, to run, to disappear. And yet, for the first time in years, she wasn't sure she wanted to leave. The snow came early that year, thin and dry, hissing against the windows like sand. Harper stood at the kitchen table with her sleeves rolled up, kneading dough for the next day's bread. The children were out with Walt feeding the chickens, and the quiet felt deeper than usual. Zeke came in from the barn, boots heavy with frost, and set a wrapped parcel on the table beside her. From town, he said. General store had a few bolts of cloth come in. Figured you could make Becca a dress that fits. Harper wiped her hands and pulled the cloth open. It was a soft blue gingham, the kind girls wore to Sunday gatherings. She ran her fingers over it, the gesture careful. I thought you didn't spend on things you didn't need, she said. I don't. He reached for the coffee pot. But she's growing. Can't keep her in what ain't hers. Harper folded the fabric and set it aside. You're not their blood. No, he said, pouring his cup. But they're here. That's enough. She hesitated, then asked, What about me? He sipped once before answering. You're here too. That night, after the children were asleep, Harper took out her mother's brooch and sat by the fire. She hadn't looked at it in weeks. The gold was dulled now, the clasp bent slightly. She turned it in her palm, remembering the way it had shone pinned to her mother's collar on warm spring Sundays, back before the debts, before the sheriff came. Zeke stepped into the doorway, watching her. "You never wear it," he said. "I used to," she said, "when I was someone else." He came closer, crouching beside the hearth. "You're not her anymore?" "I don't know who I am," she said. "Maybe I never did." He didn't speak right away. The fire popped, and the wind groaned at the eaves. "I figured you were running," he said finally. "Didn't know from what." "Didn't matter." She looked up sharply. "You knew. I've met enough folks to tell when someone's looking over their shoulder." He met her eyes. "But you've never lied to me straight out. Just kept pieces back." She opened her mouth, closed it again. "I came here planning to steal from you," she said. "Figured I'd take what I could and vanish." Zeke didn't flinch. "Why didn't you?" "I don't know," she whispered. "Maybe because no one ever looked at me like you do. Like I could be something clean." He reached out and took the brooch from her hand, turned it once, then handed it back. "You could leave," he said. "No one's holding you." "I know," she said, "but I don't want to." Snow thickened through the next week, and the rhythm of the ranch changed. The cattle were brought in closer, the days shortened, and work shifted indoors. Harper mended shirts and taught Becca how to stitch straight seams. Bo followed Zeke like a shadow, walking with his arms crossed just like the man did, mimicking his quiet. One evening, as Harper stirred stew over the stove, Bo came in holding a carved horse. "Zeke made it," he said with pride. "Said he used to whittle with his brother." Harper turned the figure over in her hands. The legs were uneven, but the shape held a kind of grace. She set it on the shelf above the stove. Later, after supper, she found Zeke behind the barn, brushing down his horse. The sky overhead was cloudless, stars sharp and close. "You don't talk much about your brother," she said. "No reason to," he replied. Harper leaned against the post nearby. "Bo said you used to carve together." Zeke's brush slowed. "He was younger than me. Got caught in a blizzard trying to bring in strays." "That was 7 years ago." She didn't offer comfort. He didn't want it. "What was his name?" she asked. "Eli." They stood in the cold, breath fogging the air between them. "You think about leaving?" Harper asked. "Sometimes," he said. "But the land's in my bones now. I wouldn't know what to do without it. I think I'm tired of running." Zeke set the brush down and turned to her. Then stopped. Her hands were cold, but her chest felt warm. Inside the house, the fire burned low. Harper stood by the window after the lanterns were put out, watching the snow drift past the panes. She could still leave, take the brooch, disappear into the next county, change her name again. But her feet didn't move. She turned toward the small bedroom where Becca and Bo slept soundly, their breaths even, their bodies nestled under quilts she'd mended with her own hands. In the silence, she realized that somewhere between the lies and the hard work, she had built something that felt steady, and she wasn't ready to give it up. The first thaw came in late February, thin rivulets of meltwater trickling down the slope behind the barn. The earth turned dark and soft, and Zeke began checking fence lines again for rot. Harper stood at the clothesline, pinning up the children's shirts while the wind tugged at her braid. It had grown longer since she'd arrived, and she no longer cared to pin it up tightly. Bo came running from behind the shed, cheeks red, holding something wrapped in burlap. "Found it by the creek," he said, breathless. "Looks like a trap." Zeke appeared from the corral, wiping his hands on a rag. He took the bundle from Bo and unwrapped it slowly. A steel-jawed spring trap, rusted but still dangerous. He stared down at it with a tight mouth. "That's no ranchers," he muttered. Harper stepped closer. "Poachers." "Maybe," he said, Or someone hoping to scare off stock? She glanced toward the tree line. You think it's about the land? Zeke didn't answer. That night, Zeke sat out at the edge of the pasture, rifle across his knees. Harper brought him a tin of coffee, crouched beside him on the log he'd dragged over. You think someone's trying to push you out, she said quietly. Zeke kept his eyes on the dark. This valley's always drawn men who want more than they've earned. Most give up when winter comes. Some wait till spring and take what isn't theirs. She looked at his hands, steady on the stock of the rifle. You going to stay out every night? Only till I know the land's safe. She hesitated, then said, I could take the children into Stillwater for a few days. Stay with the pastor's wife. Zeke shook his head. You belong here. So do they. Harper wrapped her arms around her knees. I've never belonged anywhere. You do now. She felt the words settle inside her like something solid. The next morning, Zeke rode to the northern ridge to check for more traps. Harper stayed behind, keeping the children close. She had just finished sweeping the hearth when a rider approached from the south, slow and cautious. A man dismounted in front of the porch. Dusty coat, heavy boots, a pistol at his hip. He tipped his hat, but his eyes were sharp. Looking for a woman, he said. Goes by Clara Gold. Or maybe Harper Gentry. Harper stepped outside, heart thudding, but kept her face even. Never heard those names. She's wanted for theft in Dodge City. Took coin and a brooch off a merchant last fall. Description matches you, Mississippi. She didn't reach for anything, didn't run. Just stared at him. Sheriff send you? She asked. No, he said. I collect for folks who don't bother with sheriffs. She didn't speak. Bo came to the doorway, barefoot and curious. The man's eyes flicked to him. Didn't think you'd be playing house out here. Harper stepped forward, voice low. You're not taking me. He smiled, slow. Not yet, but I'll be back. He mounted and rode off without another word. That night, she told Zeke everything. They sat at the kitchen table long after the children were asleep. She didn't cry, didn't beg, just laid out the truth like kindling. The merchant, the brooch, the name she'd used, the one she'd left behind. Zeke didn't speak for a long time. Finally, he said, I knew there was something. You should tell me to go. I should, he said. But I won't. She looked down at her hands. You don't owe me that. No, he said. But I want it. The next day, Zeke rode into Stillwater and returned with a folded paper. A signed statement from the merchant, saying the brooch had been returned and no charges were sought. Harper sat on the porch steps, the paper trembling in her fingers. How did you? Old favor, Zeke said. He was more interested in the money than the law. I didn't ask you to fix it. He crouched beside her. I didn't do it for you. I did it for us. She looked up then, and something in her shifted. Later that spring, after the snows melted and the creek ran high, Harper planted a row of beans along the side of the cabin. She taught Becca how to press the seeds into the earth, how to cover them without packing the soil too tight. Bo ran through the grass with a stick pretending it was a rifle, shadowing Zeke's every step. That evening, as the sun dipped low and gold across the valley, Zeke took Harper's hand in his and led her behind the barn, where the air smelled of fresh earth and green things. I was thinking, he said, we could build another room, something with space for a piano, maybe a desk. She blinked, startled. A piano? You said once you played. She smiled, slow and full. That was a long time ago. Doesn't mean it's gone. She looked around the land, the hills, the growing things, then back at him. I don't want to leave this place, she said. You don't have to. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small ring, plain and worn, but clean. Found this in my mother's trunk. Thought maybe you'd wear it. She stared at it, then at him. You mean it? I do. She didn't nod, didn't cry, just took his hand in both of hers and held it tight. I'll plant flowers out front, she said. I figured you would. And when the stars came out, they stayed on the porch long after the children were in bed, speaking low, making plans that didn't involve running or hiding, just living, together. The new room went up by early June, framed in pine and sweat. Zeke built it himself with Walt's help, the scent of fresh-cut timber mixing with the wild lupin blooming in the meadow. Harper stitched curtains from a faded quilt top she'd found in the old trunk out back, the colors patchworked and sun-softened. The piano arrived 2 weeks later, hauled in pieces by wagon from Stillwater and reassembled by hand. She didn't play it much, not yet, but she dusted it every morning and kept a small jar of prairie roses on top. They didn't speak of marriage again right away, not because the answer had changed, but because there was no hurry. The days stretched long and full, stitched together by chores and meals and quiet glances that said more than words ever could. One morning, Harper walked the ridge above the pasture with Becca and Bo trailing behind. She carried a tin pail and a length of twine, collecting wild mint and yarrow. The children raced ahead, their laughter light as creek water. Zeke found them there after supper, the herbs laid out on the table, their names written in chalk on scraps of slate. You teaching them? He asked, setting his hat on the peg. I'm showing them what I know, Harper said, tying the twine into bundles. That's not the same. He picked up one of the bundles and turned it in his hand. You ever think about teaching proper? At the schoolhouse. They'd never have someone like me, she said. Even if the past's behind me, some folks still want it nailed to the door. Zeke didn't argue. He just set the bundle back down and reached for her hand. Then teach here, he said. Start small. Whoever wants to learn will come. She didn't answer, but the next morning she cleared a corner of the new room and set up a slate board Walt found in the shed. Becca and Bo sat cross-legged on the floor while Zeke stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching her write letters with chalk. By the end of the week, 2 neighbor children joined them. By the end of the month, there were 6. The children stayed close that summer. Becca followed Harper through the garden rows, asking endless questions about roots and stems. Bo clung to Zeke's side, and when a calf was born breech in late July, he stayed up all night waiting by the barn door, refusing to sleep until Zeke gave the all-clear. Harper found herself humming again small tunes from Kansas summers, tunes her mother used to sing while hanging linens. She caught Zeke listening once, leaning against the porch post with his coffee, a quiet ease in his face that hadn't been there when she first arrived. One Sunday he took her hand and led her to the creek bend, where the cottonwoods leaned low and the grass grew soft. He spread a blanket over the earth and sat beside her, the children off chasing frogs upstream. You ever miss it? He asked. What? Running. She shook her head. There's nothing left to chase. And nothing chasing me. Zeke nodded once. I've been thinking about the preacher. She looked sideways at him. You want him to bless the house? I want him to marry us. Her breath caught, not from surprise but from the rightness of it. I don't want a dress, she said. Not a new one. Then wear what you have, he said. I'll wear mine. They told the children first. Becca clapped. Bo asked if he could hold the ring. They married in the clearing behind the barn, beneath the same cottonwoods where he'd first asked. The preacher came on horseback, a Bible in one hand, his wife behind him with a basket of bread and dried apple. Walt and the other hands stood by with combed hair and polished boots. The neighbor children brought flowers, wild and bright. Harper wore her blue gingham. Zeke wore his Sunday shirt and a clean vest. The brooch she once thought she'd have to sell was pinned at her collar, not as a debt, but as belonging. When the preacher finished, Zeke didn't kiss her right away. He just looked at her, steady, like he had that first day, and said, "You're home now." She kissed him then, with the wind in the trees and the children cheering behind them. That night, after the last lantern was out and the hands had gone to their bunks, Harper lay beside him and traced the old scar on his forearm, the one he never spoke of but never hid. "You never asked what I did before," she said. "I knew enough," he answered. "And now?" He turned toward her, his voice quiet in the dark. "Now I know everything I need." She fell asleep with his hand in hers, the windows open to the night and the soft rustle of leaves. The next spring, Harper's rosemary bloomed early. Becca learned to read without stumbling. Bo carved his first wooden horse with Zeke's old knife. Harper taught 3 more children from nearby homesteads, and Zeke built them all a longer bench. Some nights, Harper played the old piano, slow and soft, while Zeke sat with a ledger and the children leaned against his legs. She never played the same tune twice, and when the sun went down, and the wind passed gently through the grass, it didn't carry the sound of running feet anymore. Only laughter and music, and the quiet weight of love earned the long way.